A fund used to clean up gasoline leaks at gas stations and convenience stores around the state could be in danger of running out of money. Last fiscal year, there were more than 170 gas tank leaks across the state. As Rebecca Thiel reports, without money for cleanups, Hoosiers' drinking water could be put at risk.
When you pump gas, it comes from large tanks underneath the station. And when they leak, that can send contamination into the ground and sometimes the drinking water. That's why Indiana has something called the Excess Liability Trust Fund. It reimburses companies that clean up these leaks. It's also funded by taxpayers like you. For every gallon of gas that you put into your car, you pay a penny into the fund for cleanups. But the Indiana Department of Environmental Management says some companies that do these cleanups are taking advantage of that fund.
Good morning again.
Good morning. Greg Cobb and his family own 6 gas stations and convenience stores in the Warsaw area. About 4 years ago, he hired a company to clean up a leak at one of those stations. Because most of these companies get reimbursed through the state, Cobb says he didn't pay much attention to how much they were charging. That changed last year when the Indiana Department of Environmental Management sent him a copy of a bill for cleanup at his gas station. It was for $650,000. And Cobb says the work wasn't even done.
I was pretty shocked. I was shocked when I saw how much they had already spent and hadn't really gotten anywhere.
Cobb says he fired the company and hired a new one, though the work still isn't finished. Indiana reimburses companies that clean up leaks up to $2.5 million per site. That's more than any other state in the country. 2 years ago, the average cost for cleaning up a tank leak in Indiana was more than 3 times the national average. But some companies say it doesn't have to cost that much. Workers for Creek Run Environmental drilled through the concrete at an old gas station site in Columbus to collect soil samples. Owner Jason Lenz says while the state sets wages for employees at companies doing cleanups, it hasn't set caps on their hours. He says when someone like a project manager, who could make more than $100 an hour, takes their time on the job, that can add up.
There's no oversight. IDEM has no recourse to say, well, let me look at your records. How could that be? What's the problem? Why does it take you longer than this guy? All they have to do is say, well, it just did.
The Indiana Department of Environmental Management turned to legislators for help. It crafted a bill that clarified who can get reimbursed through the fund and how many hours they can get paid for certain tasks. At a state Senate hearing, IDEM's chief of staff, Brian Rockensu, said, because of abuse and declining revenues, there's only about $75 million left in the fund.
And it's important to note that if we drop to $25 million, the fund will go into priority payment. And what this means is we will only pay for claims on sites that pose an imminent threat to human health and the environment.
But the bill never made it past committee. While IDEM is pointing the finger at companies doing cleanups, some companies are pointing it right back at IDEM. Between 2013 and 2017, Golar's Environmental Engineering was reimbursed for more money than any other company in the state. Former Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller serves as general counsel for Golar's. He says it's not that the company is charging too much, it's that IDEM is taking too long to approve cleanup plans, forcing companies to continue to monitor the contamination to make sure it isn't moving or spreading.
Well, you have to keep waiting for IDEM to approve the last thing before you move on to the next part of the plan. If it takes a year, that's going to be 4 quarterly monitors, which can cost anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000.
But more importantly, Zeller says,
there's nothing that goes on that is not required by the agency.
Maybe IDEM and remediation companies are both to blame for draining the fund. That's what Sue Esserman thinks. She's a former IDEM employee currently in a lawsuit with the agency. Mary Jane LaPointe is her lawyer in the case. Esserman used to review claims until she was fired in 2014. IDEM says it was for poor performance, but she says it was because she refused to rubber stamp costly claims.
I'm kind of a stickler for details, have been for many years, and if you're going to be reimbursed for labor hours, contractor costs, supply costs, I would like to see the documentation. before signing off. And we're talking, in many cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Esserman says there was a lot of pressure to review and approve claims quickly. She says because no one was looking too carefully, companies doing cleanups were more likely to abuse the system. IDEM refused to make anyone available to respond to Esserman's statements. When Greg Cobb started working in the gasoline business more than 3 decades ago, he says the industry was a lot less careful. Gas tanks didn't have double walls. There were no catch basins for leaks under the pump.
It wasn't uncommon for a transport driver to overfill a tank and have it running down the street. Very common.
Many of those old tanks and the contamination that came with them are still there today, threatening the health of Hoosiers and the environment. If the money in the fund goes away, it's unclear if there will be an incentive to clean them up. For Indiana Newsdesk, I'm Rebecca Thiel.